Hey there, Internet. My name's Luxander, and today I want to talk about some of the changes I have experienced on low-dose tea. For those who don't already know, I was on a full dose of testosterone for 2 years, and I have old videos documenting that. There's a transition playlist that this is going to end up on. Feel free to go watch those if you want to. I would imagine that the majority of the kind of changes you would expect to have on puberty happened when I did this the first time. Like, my voice did the significant amount of its dropping in those 2 years, bottom growth, hair changes. I think a lot of that stuff has already mostly occurred, and because I don't feel like many of my changes reverted, I was expecting very little in this while I'm microdosing. I'm taking effectively half the dose that I was on before, and now I'm about a month and a half, almost 2 months in, and I thought that, it wouldn't be that big of a thing, but I do have changes to report, and I promised that I would, so here we go. And just to clarify on what the dose is, I'm taking 200 milligram strength testosterone cypionate, and I am injecting 0.25 milliliters once per week, which kind of ends up being effectively half the dose that I used to be on when I would do 200 milligram strength, 1 milliliter every other week. For a long while now, I have been on a progestin-only form of birth control, and I noticed that it, over time, reduced my libido, and I felt a little bit less myself while that was going on. And one of the very first things that happened while I'm now on T again was that my libido kind of rebounded back. It's probably not quite as intense as it has been in previous times in my life, but it is pretty much back to what I consider to be a normal level. Another one of the more immediate changes was the smell of my sweat has changed a bit. This happened to me before, and it is something that I pretty well expected. Basically, the smell of my BO is a lot more sharp, and I've used the word pinchy in the past to describe the way that it smells, and it is definitely at that point, and I'm feeling a lot more like I need to wear deodorant because it is a much more noticeable kind of smell than what I might normally experience. I've also started to notice some differences with hair. So I have a few chin hairs. I didn't get a lot of facial hair when I was on testosterone the first time. My chin hairs have stayed there since I quit for 2 years. Maybe they were growing slower, and so I've definitely noticed that they are growing in faster than they had previously been, so I'm definitely getting that feeling like I need to shave more often. They're very sparse whiskers, and I feel like if I let them get very long, it's going to look strange. I would say that my shadowy mustache up here is looking to my eye like it's growing in a little bit darker, but that's something that I will have to keep an eye on. Again, I don't know what to expect with this. I was also sitting in my boxers earlier this week and was just sort of looking at my thighs and realized that some of the hairs on my thigh are starting to get longer. This is, for me, what I have noticed as a pattern. Like, the hair on my thighs is very thin and blonde, and when I was on T before, I started noticing that some of them were starting to get longer, and after they started to get longer, they started to turn black. Most of those have gone back to being the way that they were before I ever started T, and that doesn't really bother me. I don't particularly like having very hairy legs. I still shave my legs on a fairly regular basis just because it's a sensory thing for me. But yeah, I've definitely noticed that some of the hairs on my thigh are getting longer and a little bit thicker. The texture of those really, really thin hairs, usually, if you tug on them, they just kind of like, ooh, they just let go out of the follicle, and they are a little bit more strong in that follicle and not wanting to be easily pulled out. So that's another sign to me that the hair is starting to get thicker, more coarse, and will start growing in darker soon. And the last hormone thing that I want to touch on is emotions. You know, your emotional states can change somewhat when you're on testosterone versus if you're on estrogen. And the only real thing that I've noticed in that way is that sometimes if I feel like I need to cry or want to cry, I have a harder time actually getting to that point. So, like, I'll feel it in my throat, and I'll, have all these feelings in my chest, like I really need to get it out, but it takes a little bit more for me to get to a point where I can just cry and get it out of my system. That's also another thing that I had previously noticed when I was on T before. I would say that the first 6 months were an emotional adjustment in that sense that being sad was less prevalent, and I would start to get more angry about things that were making me sad instead of getting stuck in that sad place. Not necessarily noticing that at the present, but again, I am having a harder time crying than I might normally. Things that are very sweet are not making me cry as easily, so that's, the emotional changes. I feel like maybe that's a disappointingly short overview of what's been going on because I didn't expect there to be any noticeable changes this early on. I did expect my libido to be a pretty quick thing. I didn't expect to notice new hair stuff going on, definitely, and I wasn't sure what to anticipate emotionally, but I think that all of these things are fairly consistent with what I'm used to being on a higher dose. It's all just happening at a lower dose kind of speed, like a slower kind of pace, which I really appreciate. It's, not a huge shock to my system. The way that my doctor does things, he starts everybody on this low dose and then kind of grows to the point where you're on the kind of normal high dose that I was on before to give you a bit of a more natural progression and to give less shock to your system going so firmly from, this dominant hormone to this other dominant hormone. So I would say that overall, I'm very pleased with how things are going. I feel very comfortable with myself, and I'm really glad that I made this decision. And of course, as I continue to notice new things happening, I will update you periodically. Not necessarily going to be on any kind of schedule, because it is going to be when I notice changes. I don't want to have, it's 3 months and nothing is different from when I updated you at the 2-month mark. I don't really think that that's a fun thing to do. I want to tell you when things are happening, not just make the video for the sake of having a video to mark the occasion of them. 1 month, 2 month, 3 month. I want to actually just tell you what changes are happening. So libido, smell, facial hair, leg hair, and some emotional changes are all I have to report to you at this time. And since that is all I have to report, I'm going to end this video here. So thank you very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. Leave me pretty analytics to look at and comments to read. You can find me on Patreon to help me pay for my hormones and blood tests and stuff, or you can tip me on PayPal to also assist with that. Subscribe if you feel like it, and ring the bell to get notified, because apparently I'm not doing videos on time anymore. And, I hope you have an okay day. Bye. Thank you to the beautiful people over on my Patreon who help me pay for my hormones. I want to especially thank The Gay Agenda, Amber Music, Gretchen Becker, Wellington Marcus, Elizabeth Bartell, Pinesnake, Jess Zendrex, and Mr. Atheist. You are so appreciated. Thank you.